A forever series is a piece of media that, go figure, has no plans of stopping. When I think about a forever series, you have to go back to British television classic Coronation Street, which has now been running for 65 years. Like, that show can literally retire if it wants to. When you think about manga, you have to go to One Piece. And when you talk about LitRPG, I think there's sort of one name that sits above the rest, and that is, of course, The Wandering Inn, which is now coming in at over 14 million words. That's a lot of words. That's a lot of words. But it does mean that this is a series that has been going on for a very long period of time. It has amassed quite a lot of fans. But that's not without its drawbacks, because forever series, as great as some of them may be, they do have some problems. And that's what I want to talk about here today, particularly through the lens of LitRPG. Now, if you're a LitRPG fan and you haven't seen some of the stuff I've already done on the channel, yeah, maybe I might want to check that out. And also having a lot of really cool LitRPG content coming out on the channel in the future. So if you're interested in that at all, be sure to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comments, because I have a question. What is your number? What is your limit? If you're someone who is reading one of these sort of top long-running series, is there a book? Like, what number do you drop off at? Or do you stay completely up to date? Are you always wanting to get that next chapter? Are you always making sure you're subscribed on Patreon? I want to know. Is this a factor? Are these things I'm about to talk about, are those something that affect you? Do you think I'm way off the mark? Definitely let me know down below in the comments. And I do also want to caveat, this is not a dig at any specific author. This is just talking about sort of the business and the mechanics and the real practical nature of trying to keep one of these long-standing series going, keeping them fresh, keep them entertaining and exciting, and why some of the biggest authors that you follow have really good reasons not to want these series to stop. So let's talk about some of the problems with forever series. Now, the first one, you got to get this one out of the way. This is, I would say, one of the root of a lot of the other issues that occurs, and that's just overall lack of direction. When a lot of authors sit down, they have an idea in their head for a new story, a new book, maybe even a series. There's often sort of a very clear path or an arc or trajectory for the characters that they want to take this story on. I mean, you think about the very classic fantasy archetype, the young farm boy, there's this inciting incident or the call to adventure. They get brought out on a quest. They have their training, their highs and lows. Maybe things go horribly wrong, but they rally and recover, save the day, defeat the villain, get the girl, and then live happily ever after. That's kind of the standard arc, but what happens when you got to keep going after you're forever after? Well, it's when you get series that are going, things continue to expand. But part of the problem is that oftentimes authors will sit down with sort of a very clear vision for how they have this story going. And in a lot of cases for the stories that are, looking at the top of the charts on places like Patreon, when these books find success, when these characters find success, you are very incentivized monetarily to keep things going. Now, we're lucky in a lot of cases that these authors have set themselves up with progression fantasy, having a very long path that they can take, going from bronze to silver to gold. There are very clear paths and levels. And, it's one of these things where they've sort of built themselves in a bit of cushion. But part of the problem is progression fantasy still is at the end of the day about progressing and getting stronger. And when we talk about our second big issue, which is pacing, if you feel like you need to continue to stretch this, I'm not going to use the word milk it, though some folks could definitely be, that could be an accusation that could be levied, I think, in some cases. This progression still needs to feel earned and feel rewarding. And yes, you absolutely don't want to rush through things. If we're talking about things that could take hundreds or thousands of years, especially for some of these bigger cultivation epics, it makes sense that it's going to take time on the page. It has to feel earned from these characters. Absolutely. But part of the problem with pacing when you're dealing with, again, these really ridiculous timescales is that it starts to get really out of whack. I am going to use one specific example here because it's a book that I read not that long ago, Getting On Later in Defiance of the Fall. Now, I actually really enjoy this series. Some folks have given it more criticism towards the end. I think I'm on book 11, I want to say. That's a lot of books. That's a decent amount of reading. But some of the issues that I encountered specifically with, I want to say, like books like 7 through 10, was that where the book was very clearly not set up for where the story was. Paul, that doesn't make any sense. It does, because these series are written as a serial, week over week, chapter over chapter. But where the story was to say, this is where I want to put the book, this last book was 650 words, well, I don't want this next book to be 1,000 words, we have to think about this from a logistical standpoint. Okay, well, I'll cut my story here and here. but the arcs are like off center for where the books are. You have like the big, climax of the story at the midpoint of where this book is because the books aren't laid out or structured that way. And that's a huge issue with this in terms of pacing. The second you try and take these stories from places like Patreon and Royal Road, they start to get pretty out of whack with things like Kindle Unlimited, the real logistics of getting cover art designed and blurbs and audiobooks made, like especially for some of these authors who are using these massive names in the audiobook world who are backed up for potentially for years. I sympathize. It is a real issue, and it's not necessarily their fault. It is just strictly an issue with this as these things start going beyond, well, literally millions and millions of words in some cases. So pacing is definitely a huge issue, not only in terms of like making the power scaling still feel like there is a, eventually they are going to get to S tier, probably, versus, hey, making sure it feels earned. It's trying to find and strike that balancing point. Now, one of the other serious things that a lot of these series are accused of is, especially once you start to develop these big casts of characters, again, you've been with these characters for literally millions of words up to a certain point, is that things just kind of stop mattering. Like, the main characters are always going to be safe. Almost always that the core side characters are going to be fine. There's no real threat. It's because these writers are so, again, this is an amazing part about this, because they're so, in terms of constant communication, there's always back and forth between the reader base, whether it's on Discord, whether it's in Patreon comments, what have you. And these readers are so invested in these characters that I think in a lot of situations, authors don't feel like they can kill them off. And because of that, these books just kind of stop feeling like they have stakes. I'm a fan of Azeroth Healer as a series. I'm caught up to date in the 5 books that are out now. I really enjoy it. I like Ilya as a character. I think they're great, but there really just comes a point where she's not going to lose a fight. Because of course not. She's the main, she's the main character. Are any of the side characters ever really in danger? Probably not. And even when the author is staring into your soul and trying to convince you that this is a ridiculous epic battle against a being of god tier potential, and then, oh no, this is finally the one that could do it, that's probably not going to be the case, because there's been a certain setup and expectation. And obviously, Martin gets a lot of flack as an author for a lot of different things, but that is something to be said about this sort of more classic fantasy setup with a series that has a very clear beginning, middle, and end, is that there's just more threat. There's just more stakes. I want to read books that have stakes. And I find as these series get along and as fans get more and more attached to these characters, that I just feel like authors are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either you piss off your fans by killing off core characters, or you never do, and then everything just kind of gets very samey. And that's unfortunate. That's just not a lot of fun. So, Paul, at this point in the video, you might be asking me, why do people do forever series? If this is the case, why don't they just plan out their series and go, it's going to end here? And in some cases, it sounds like authors have. I mean, I've heard Shirtaloon, as an example, has said that, originally, I guess He Who Fights with Monsters was supposed to be like 12 books, or maybe it was 14. And now we don't know. And the reality is this is where we get, and again, I'm not speaking ill of anybody. This is not a call out in any specific way. This is just a reality of the world we live in, is that at this point, for a lot of these big authors, especially, who are making literally tens of thousands of dollars just on Patreon, you bring in Kindle Unlimited and audiobook numbers into that, are making millions of dollars with these series, they have absolutely no incentive to stop. This is just the perfect, brutal apex of art and capitalism. And it's just unfortunate, because it's risky. It's so risky to finish a series like this. Can you imagine? I think for a lot of these bigger folks, they could probably transition folks over. But if you're someone who's been with Zach and Defiance of the Fall for 14 books, and maybe it gets up to 18 books, sure, some part of you wants to see it end, wants to see a conclusion, wants to see an ending to these characters that you've come to love so much. But at the same time, there's absolutely no guarantee for these authors that these people are going to go on to the next one, that your readers are going to keep following you, that your next one's going to be as big of a hit. And the reality is we're facing a point where there's absolutely no incentive other than a slow death for them to finish these series. And again, we're starting to see more and more comments. I see this on Reddit all the time of folks finally starting to get a little bit kind of, less inclined to recommend some of these sort of bigger, longer series. And that's why I think, as an example, you hate to bring it up in every single LitRPG video, but Dungeon Crawler Carl, the fact that Matt Dinniman has very clearly said, like, he already knows how the series is going to end. I think it's roughly going to be 10 books, I think probably give or take. But like, we know this is going to end with Carl getting to the bottom of the dungeon. We sort of have a very general sense of sort of how this is going to end. And knowing that going in, knowing that there's going to be a finish in this is a bold move in this day and age. But it's something that I really personally enjoy. If I don't know that the author has the end of a series in sight, it makes it a lot harder for me to invest in that. Because if they don't necessarily know where it's going to end, I just have a little bit less confidence. And I had some real issues and gripes with the end of the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, but I still have to give her so many props for how she planned out that series. Literally, the first scene of the first book is the last scene of the last book. They are that interconnected. It was written as one through storyline, and that is really fantastic and takes a lot of skill. And I'm not saying that these LitRPG authors don't have that same level of skill necessarily. It's just that it really does feel like, especially I'm like on book 5 of Path of Ascension, like book 11 of, Defiance of the Fall. I'm caught up to date outside of Patreon for Azrael. It does start to feel like we are getting into some of these stages where we're just kind of just keep writing to write, especially when you get into the serialized format and you're expected to pump out thousands and thousands of words. And then you get to the next part. And the reason that I haven't read things like The Wandering Inn, and the reason that I haven't read One Piece, the investment. I did a video on the Cosmere and talking about things you need to know. And it's a daunting task. It's a daunting challenge for people to sit down and go, oh my God, where do I start? And knowing that there's 14 million words, I'm probably never going to read The Wandering Inn. Knowing that there's just so much to read. Like, I want to read other things. And yeah, it could be one of those things where you read like one book at a time and go to other stuff and come back to it over the years. But it's part of the reason why I haven't finished Wheel of Time. Part of the reason why I haven't read Malazan. Because this is a really big investment. And candidly, as someone who is doing more stuff for BookTube as well these days, you're punished as a BookTuber for taking time to read these huge series. Now that's like number 10 of 10 on my priority list. I want to read books I want to read. Not like I don't make videos about 90% of the books that I read because I'm just reading a lot of stuff on LitRPG and on my Kindle. But still, for the average person to sit down and go, oh my God, I'm going to commit years of my life to this, it's tough. It is really tough. So you're sort of at this really horrible situation as some of these really successful writers where fans there's a diehard cohort of fans who want to keep reading. There are a second cohort of fans who are feeling like it's falling off, or certain arcs don't hit as hard, and this is a huge issue for manga and anime as well, even beyond things like One Piece that are some of the longer standing ones. And, it used to be good, but then it's fallen off. Like, I have more and more consistently seen that. So you're like, okay, do I finish it and risk starting a new series? It's tough. And this isn't a video where I'm trying to present some sort of answer. I just want to have a dialogue and a discussion. What do you guys think? Should authors be more willing to say, yes, I'm going to put a hard cap on this. I'm going to say, yes, we're going to hit the highest rank there is, and we're going to take over the universe in X number of books. Or are they totally valid in just saying, nope, I'm going to keep writing this until I die. Give me 20 years. I'll still be writing this week after week, chapter after chapter. You'll keep seeing me. Is one more valid than the other? What do you think? Because I'm legitimately curious. Because again, for a lot of these fans that have been with these authors for years and years at this point, if you're someone who, again, has been subscribed to like, Shirtaloon or Zogarth or something over on Patreon for years, I'm really curious to hear what you think about this. Because again, I'm someone who tends to read stuff more as they sort of come out on I like to read books more so than anything. I'm sort of getting more into Royal Road and sort of appreciating reading things as a serial. But the fact that Royal Road doesn't have indents bugs me to no end. It makes it very hard to read dialogue. I'll be honest. I don't like it. It's my personal thing. Just throwing it out there. But yeah, again, I just want to have a bit of a conversation with discussion with you because I've been, again, reading a lot more. I've read probably 40 or 50 LitRPG books in the last year. And I'm just really curious to see what you all think. Let me know down in the comments. And again, I have a bunch more stuff coming out on the channel, including now a series of interviews. I've mentioned I've teased interviews over the last 5 months. It's now being a whole full-blown series interviewing a bunch of different authors. And agents and people who own book publishing companies. It's very cool. I have some very exciting stuff coming down the pipe, and like literally like starting in the next week. So again, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And please let me know down in the comments what you think about this whole forever series thing as a concept. Are you for it? Are you against it? Do you get it? Do you think it's silly? I want to hear your opinion. All right. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.